Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon.
How many got something in your life right now that's taking longer than it should if God is big? Okay. How many got something in your life right now that you feel like God must be telling me no? He might. He might.
This is 4S. I'm David Johnson. Let's get started. And today we have a nice sermon. It's short. It's, I would put it in the category of a pretty good sermon as sermons go. Sometimes it's hard to find a sermon that I want to share with you, not because there aren't a lot of sermons online. It's just that most sermons are bad. You would not want to hear them, and it would be hard to make a good show out of them. So I think this one is okay, and it's on an interesting topic that I think is always evergreen. This gentleman is talking about God's timing. You know, it's kind of that prayer thing. God can say yes, no, or not yet. Well, he could say no, says this preacher. He has a bit more to say.
He might. One time in the Bible, King David, he wanted to build a temple for God. Who better to do it? He wrote all the songs. Ooh. Why not build the house that would house the songs that he wrote for God? But he didn't get to do it. In fact, the prophet told him, go ahead, do it, man. That sounds good. And God stopped the prophet in his tracks. And the prophet had to pivot and turn back and say, David, I went home and prayed about that thing. And dude, I love you so much. And you are so amazing. And you are so incredible as a leader. I thought, well, surely God would let him do it. And God will say yes to you. I mean, you want to build God a temple? Why wouldn't God get behind that? It's a good thing in your heart. But the Lord said, well, he didn't say no. He said, not you.
Okay. So, without recapping the story, wouldn't that make this prophet a false prophet, or at least a bad one? If he's going off and saying, yeah, you want to do this? The answer is yes, absolutely. And then he has to go back and say, oh, wait a minute, I was just talking out of my butt. God doesn't actually want you to do that. If we get this narrated scene where that happens, how many times would it have happened where we don't get the narrated scene, where someone is just talking out of their butt, they're a prophet of God, and we don't get the correction? Just curious.
That's hard to hear. Not you. He said, your son Solomon is going to do it. You got too much blood on your hands.
By the way, isn't not you the same as no? I mean, David said, I want to build you a temple. He didn't say, I want my family to build you a temple. I want to do it. I want to be the architect. I want to make this happen. So he says, well, God didn't exactly say no. Well, yes, he did. That's a no, my friend. So, you know, if I ask my boss for a promotion, that for an open position, and they say, well, not you, but we are going to fill the promotion with this other person. That's what we call a no. Also, the whole, you can't build my temple because you've got too much blood on your hand. He fought holy wars for God. That's good blood. How the heck? When I was a Christian, I've never understood it. David fought holy wars for God. He killed Goliath, you know, as his first act in becoming king. And now that's coming to bite him. Oh, yeah, you can't build my temple because you did what I wanted you to do. So it doesn't make any sense. By the way, If you just keep reading a little further and see the beginning of Solomon's reign, full of blood. So how much blood is too much blood? I do not understand. That does not make any sense at all. Sermon continue.
But I'm still going to do it through you.
That's still a no.
David spent the rest of his life storing up the materials to hand over for a project that he would never personally receive the benefit from.
In other words, no.
This is the part of the sermon that you leave out if your goal is a shout. But my goal is not to just give you a shout in church. Because if you shout, what do you have? A sore throat. What we have to learn to do is realize that Jesus is a miracle worker. Yes.
Okay, so we have to learn to realize that Jesus is a miracle worker. Why would we have to learn to realize that? If you are a miracle worker and you demonstrate that for me, to me, I don't have to learn to realize that you're a miracle worker. You're a miracle worker. I realize it. There's no learning process. You go to cemeteries and raise dead people. No learning process at all. I realize you're a miracle worker. So the fact that you have to learn to realize that Jesus is a miracle worker tells me he's probably not really a miracle worker. This is one of those things you have to accept on faith. You have to realize it, learn to realize it. It's a lot of weasel words that says, yeah, he really wasn't a miracle worker, but you've got to teach yourself to believe that way.
Jesus is the Savior who paid for our sins on the cross, and that is the purpose he came for, to rise from the grave, to have dominion over death, so that we could call on his name and be saved. Yes, he is also a teacher.
Okay, just so you know, other people rose from the grave before the Jesus stories were ever thought up. Old Testament stories, Hebrew scriptures have people rising from the grave and people who could raise people from the dead. That's not a new thing.
And a good teacher knows when to go slow. Maybe he is going slow because he wants to show you something. I hired a guy to teach me guitar years ago, and I went to one lesson. He seemed more interested in impressing me with how fast he could play it than showing me how I could. I thought, this won't work. If your whole goal is showing me how much you can shred, I leave knowing nothing and you feel good about yourself. The proof that you are good at this is that you can slow it down enough that I can watch and say, so I do 3rd fret, 4th fret, 6th fret, 1st fret. I mean, if he really wanted to teach me, he has to slow it down.
Okay, I'm just curious here. Let's just assume that this event happens, that it actually happened. And the teacher starts off his lesson by showing him the possibilities. This is where you can get to. I started off where you're starting, and I just want to show you where it ends up and give you some inspiration to take more lessons. Okay, that's a method. That's a method of teaching. But this guy, rather than going slow and listening to how the instructor wanted to teach him, he said, one lesson, I'm out. It's not for me. This is going to become very incongruent as his sermon continues. Yes, I've heard the sermon. But this example that he gives really, really, really stands in contradiction to all of the other things he's going to say next. And he just forgets about the story. But I didn't, and I don't want you to either.
We ask Jesus to teach us things. and we're surprised when he slows it down. We ask him to teach us to be more loving. We are surprised when he slows it down. We ask him to give us patience. Bad idea.
Well, okay. A question for the audience. When you ask Jesus to be more loving, what are you asking for? Are you asking him to override your free will? Because you're just not a loving person, or you're not loving enough. You can't get there. So you're asking Jesus to create in you a clean heart, to ignore the bad heart in you. You realize you've got a bad heart. Please give me a heart transplant. Give me a clean heart. Please override my free will, because my free will is full of sin and I will just keep sinning, but I don't want to. And I know that you can fix me. And so please just override whatever free will things that I do that would cause me to be less loving and make me more loving. What are you asking for exactly? Because if that's what you're asking for, that seems to be in opposition to the idea that God doesn't meddle with free will. And so this preacher is maybe agreeing with that idea. I'm not sure exactly how he thinks that God will make you more loving over time. I don't get that. But it sounds like you're asking for God to override your free will. I've just kind of always been curious about that. I've said prayers like that many times myself, and that is exactly what I wanted. That is exactly what I was saying. I'm as good as I can get on my own, and it's not good enough. Please make me better. Right. And then this idea of, well, you're asking for patience. Big mistake. He's going to get a big laugh line out of that, but I'll just say my piece here. So God is going to really slow things down and put you in a lot of situations where you are going to feel stressed. And, that's how God shows you patience, teaches you patience, by putting you in situations where your impatience is going to come through. And he just keeps doing it over and over and over and over again until somehow you magically get better. But if you can get better just by the trial and error of going through trials and errors, then what is God actually doing for you? You don't need God, because you're doing it the slow way on your own. If you're asking God to be more loving, and he just puts you in situations where the worst comes out of you, but over time, over years and years, you get a little bit better all the time. How is that different than you just getting better by yourself? What is God actually doing in these situations?
You have 7 days of traffic to look forward to. The worst traffic of your life. You are going to have Atlanta, Georgia traffic in Waxhaw. If you pray for patience, God will stack the deck to give you what you asked for, and he'll slow it down.
What a dick of a God.
I wanted to learn when I was in high school. I had some friends on the step team. I thought that looked really cool. I said, teach me just a simple thing on the step team. And so they went real fast. They went something like, let's see if I can remember it, like, see how fast I did that? Took about 4 months. I could just do it now. It's been like 30 years now. But I swear we were going, not because they couldn't do it, but because I couldn't do it. God's not going slow because he can't do it, but somebody who knows what I'm talking about. Let's get in this. Yeah. God didn't say no because he can't. God said slow because you can't yet. But if we can do it, I still remember this all those years because they slowed it down for me. You got to go slow for Stephen. Stephen can't do all that real quick. He's got a good heart, but he needs it real slow. Peter's real slow. John's kind of slow. Nathaniel's kind of slow. The disciples are kind of slow. How many are willing to admit it may take God slowing this down in my life, and it might not be giving it to me when I want it, out of kindness? God making it convenient isn't always kind. I think it would be amazing, right? If he said, okay, y'all are out of wine? Okay. And Mary says, they're out of wine. And Jesus says, I already got that taken care of. I found the well. Because y'all picture this miracle like they had a water hose. This water was not ionized. There is no faucet. Picture the miracle, picture the miracle, picture the miracle. It said, we're out of wine, not we're running out of wine, not we're going to be out of wine in a couple of hours. Let's do something about it now. We're out of wine when? Now. We need wine when? Now. This is what's frustrating about this kind of preaching, right? It's like wonderful, awesome, glorious, great. You're doing steps on the stage, but I'm just struggling through things that are real in my life, and I don't have time for that right now. Well, maybe there is something that Jesus wants to do in the process that will teach you where to go back when you need it again.
Okay, can I just interject here? This water to wine miracle that was described in one place as the first miracle was not the first miracle if you read the Jesus story in other places, but never mind that. It doesn't seem plausible at all as a thing that was narrated as if it was an actual event. So as the wine is going down, first of all, they knew exactly how many people were invited to the wedding. So I don't know. Why didn't they have enough wine? That seems silly. But okay, the people were more alcoholic than the hosts thought. But they saw the wine going down. And so they don't take steps to go get more wine. No, they're not going to get more wine. They're just letting it go and letting it go and letting it go until it's all gone. And then they look around and say, oh, this is a disaster. What are we going to do? The wine's all gone. None of that strikes me as realistic. And then they come to Jesus to say, hey, help us out, bro. We need some wine. The people at the wedding wouldn't have known about Jesus. It's his first miracle, right? So, his disciples come to him. Okay, well, why doesn't his disciples do something about it? I mean, why would they ever run out of wine in this way? And then why would this problem ever get to Jesus if he's surrounded by disciples who can raise dead people?
Because I'm thinking he would have the power to go out to the well, wherever they're getting the water from. I need to slow this down one more time just to get my point across, okay? Jesus, they have no more wine. What does that have to do with me, right? We've got a request, a refusal, and then a revelation. Well, what's the revelation? Of course, he is the new wine. There's an old covenant represented by the water. There's a new covenant that will be made in his blood and ratified by his death. And he's showing us that to be filled with his spirit. All of that is symbolized in the text.
Really? You see, this is how Christians read scripture. This is how Paul read the Old Testament. He sees some things in the Old Testament and then he just kind of metaphorizes that, allegorizes that, and says, here's what that means. This means Jesus. For things that clearly didn't mean Jesus. And this is what this guy is doing. I mean, he's got a conclusion in mind. Here's a story that'll serve, metaphorizes it, allegorizes it. And then once you do that, you can just come up with any fantasy meaning of the text you want. So how does he get there? Hermeneutically speaking, you don't know. This is pulled straight out of the orifice.
But simply put, this would have took a while to do what he told him to do. I love what Mary said in verse 5. Do whatever he tells you. Maybe that's the lesson he's been trying to teach us, yo. Because we've been doing all kinds of math in our life about this and that, and this needs to happen, and that needs to happen. And Mary goes, do whatever he tells you. That's the math. A few months ago, we were online talking about girl math. Do you remember that? And then Holly showed me one the other day called mom math. It was when you're calculating all the times. We need to be there at 7, so we need to have our shoes on by 6:15. So that means we need to wake up by, it was hilarious. I saw it. I said, oh, well, this week I'm preaching about Mary math. And Mary math goes like this. We got no wine and a lot of people. Do whatever he tells you. Stop letting the math distract you. I'll have enough time. I don't have enough years yet. I'm not old enough to do that. I'm not young enough to do that. Don't let the math distract you. Don't let the math distract you. For as we will see, 5 loaves and 2 fish can feed 5,000 if you do what he says.
Okay. This is simply terrible advice. It's too open-ended. If you want to say, well, this is a metaphor, or I'm speaking allegorically, you need to make that clear, because you're dealing with Christian people who are just people, and they're not always the smartest people, not always the luckiest people. And they get into situations, they think they're hearing from God, and now he's saying, hey, don't let the math get in the way. So maybe that means go ahead and buy that house. Yeah, dude, do that, dude. Go ahead and invest in that business opportunity. I know it costs more than you make right now, but are you living in faith? Don't let the math get in the way. Don't let the math stop you. Don't actually count the costs and do the work to decide whether the thing you want to do is a good idea. Because if you have faith in Jesus and does what he says, then the math doesn't matter. This ignores, by the way, all of the faithful, righteous people who stepped out into faith and got ran over. Because you know what? The math always matters.
Now, if you don't do what he says, you're on your own. Get your calculator and good luck. But if you do what he says in each moment, if you'll get attuned to the process, instead of just being a consumer, you will not need God to give you something external to produce something wonderful. For the Bible says that when Mary activated the presence of Jesus, what changed?
Wait, hang on. That's no, it doesn't say that. But if you read in a certain kind of evangelical, charismatic way, the Bible can say anything.
Out of wine. That has nothing to do with me. My hour has not yet come. When he says my hour, he's talking about his death.
Is he?
He's not saying I won't do it because there's not time yet.
Is it really? Maybe he meant the time that he would step out as a Christ figure. Maybe that's what he meant. Because he said something similar when his brothers approached him and said, hey, let's go to the fair. Come with us. Show people who you are. And he says something very similar. My time has not yet come. So you guys go. I'm not going to go. He told a bold-faced lie, because then he put on a costume, basically, in a disguise, and he went anyway. Never mind the fact that Jesus is a freaking liar. Okay? So once again, you have this kind of a fantasy interpretation going on, and I would love to see the hermeneutical math for how you got there.
He's reestablishing the big picture. There's a request, a refusal. That's where some of you are today. The refusal. Well, life won't let me. Well, they won't let me. Well, I tried that. I've been trying that for years. The refusal. And then there is, get ready, a reset. He reminds her, my hour is not yet come. This is not my ultimate destination. And then she realizes there's nothing that she needs to convince him to do. All she has to do is convince them to do what he says. The moment she says, do whatever he tells you, it's like me with Graham in wrestling. She doesn't know much, but she's coaching good. You hear me? You don't have to know that much. You just have to get going in the next thing he tells you to do. Which meant for this miracle, which meant for this moment, which meant for this occasion, that they had to go out, get the water from the well. Why did Jesus not just bless the well and everything that came out of it was wine? Why are we taking bucket after bucket after bucket, putting it down in the well, drawing it out of the well, carrying it into the house, finding the jars? We've dumped a bucket. Do you know how big these buckets were? 2 gallons. Do you remember how big the jars are? 30.
Okay, before this point gets too far away, he says, why couldn't he just bless the well and make wine come out of it? You know, as if that would have been a ridiculous expectation for God. And, you know, expectation setting is kind of important. The God that these people worshipped and knew about was a God that could tell Moses to speak to a rock or strike a rock, and he can just push water out of it. Okay, Moses didn't have to get a bunch of water. You know, he could just speak to the rock, and water would pour out of it. They didn't have to knead a bunch of dough to get manna to fall from heaven. They didn't have to do that. And so you get to this scene, and because those types of miracles from God don't fit his point, he makes those types of miracles seem ludicrous. Why would God ever do a thing like that? He wants you to go through all of this work and so forth and so on. So for me, when he asks, why wouldn't God just, make the wine come out of the well? I actually think that's a pretty good question, considering the God that we are talking about.
That's like, hang on, let me do some preacher math real quick. What's that like? 15-ish. Yeah, 20 to 30 gallons. So there's some variance, but, and now I got to do this 2 gallons at a time. But that seems pointless. If you're Jesus, go out, bless the well, and then we'll just take it in. But the real revelation to me was in this. I think you missed this when I read it. I think you missed it when I read it. While they were going out to the well and back and forth, there wasn't just 2-gallon bucket, 30-gallon, 15 fillings, which would have taken a while. The Bible says in verse chapter 7, Jesus said to the servants, watch this very carefully, very carefully. Now I'm coming to the point of the message that I preached all the way here to get you to, because I see you in your life struggling with some stuff, and I see you in your life dealing with some things, and I see you in your life going through a process that at maybe this intersection of your life seems a little pointless. The Bible says Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, so they filled them to the brim. Read again. He said, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Verse 8, then he told them, now draw some out. What's your point, Pastor? You're really slowing down here. Do you have a purpose or struggling on how to close, or do you just want the parking lot to be chaotic between services today? Are you sadistic? I'm slowing it down to show you something. I'm slowing it down to show you something. Put verse 7 over there again. Then Jesus said to them, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim, which is fine, but this is an emergency. We have no wine. And a lot of people in this culture, that was the ultimate shame. Because I know what some of you are thinking. It was probably good that the alcohol got cut off at this point in the week-long wedding. Maybe that was God making them run out of wine. It's symbolic. It's a culture of honor. And so there is shame present. And so Jesus is stepping in, not to deal with their alcoholic consumption situation. He's dealing with their shame. And one thing that feels really bad, I don't know about you, but I hate the feeling in life like I've fallen behind. The embarrassment of thinking I should know how to do that by now and I don't. The embarrassment of feeling like I should have my family here by now and I don't. The embarrassment of going, I should have whipped this 6 years ago and I didn't. Now the fear of falling behind has been combined with the reality of being at the bottom. There is no wine. This is an emergency. This is urgent. So why wouldn't Jesus let them fill one jar and start distributing it? Why? Read the text. It says they had to draw out the water and fill them to the brim. That means they had to fill all 6 before anything changed. It wasn't as if they poured the water and the water became wine, because that would have made sense. And if it made sense, then maybe they would have been addicted to it instead of believing in him.
And that doesn't make sense to me. So I've heard this kind of argument before many times. I'm sure that you have too. Perhaps you've made this kind of argument. It doesn't make any sense. That somehow, if you ask God for a miracle and he gives you the miracle, then you will become addicted to the miracle and not to Jesus. So that really makes hash out of all of the people in the Bible who asked Jesus or God or one of his representatives for a miracle, and they just gave it to him. How does that work? They could give it to them without fear of this dire consequence, but God can't give it to you. Because somehow, if he gave you a sensible miracle that you asked for out of faith, cried out to him, then that would be bad?
So they're pouring water. Water doesn't turn to wine. I don't care how much of it you pour. There's no grapes in this situation. There is nothing to suggest this is going to work. So the service, pouring and pouring and sweating and pouring and sweating and pouring and checking. Did anything happen yet? Is it drinking wine? Did he bring the wine? Not yet. And so now imagine they get the first jar full. That's 15 buckets full. That's plenty to demonstrate that I take you seriously. And the head server comes over and says, Jesus, can we take some over to the people now? Kind of get them calmed down a little bit because there's no wine and you know how to give, we just take one over there and we'll keep filling up the other ones. He said, no, not now. Fill the next one. Fill the next one. But can we take this one? No. Not now. Not now. It was not until every jar was filled to the brim and the water was drawn out of the last filled jar that it became wine. Why did God make every jar have to be filled? Why has God allowed you to pray about this for so long? Why has God not just waved his wand over our situation? Why did he reset? In order to reveal.
Let me take a stab at this. Because he doesn't exist.
It is only after the jars are filled. It is only after, I'm telling you what I know from my life. It is only after you have done it and done it and done it. And I can't speak for everybody in the room, but somebody online needs to hear this. Give me my camera, please. It is sometimes when I am almost done trying that at that moment in time, that's when God says, now. It's not when I'm fresh. It's not when I feel like I got this. It's not when it makes sense. It's not when it should have happened on a human schedule. It's at that moment where I'm like, if I have to pour one more 2-gallon bucket, if I have to do this one more time, and nothing is happening, but everything is changing in your life. For every time you pour, when your eyes can't perceive, it is a building of your faith that is producing within you the strength to know where your help comes from, the strength to know where grace comes from, the strength to know that there is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins.
Okay, we're almost done here. I said that I would get back to something that I did not. So let me just run back to that place where he was saying about Mary. The thing that she knew was that you people just need to do whatever he says. You don't need to understand it. It may seem like it's not going to work. Just do what he says. And so he's at this point. He's saying, look, you just need to just keep doing what he says. And you have done it, and you have tried, and you have tried, and you are weary of it, and it has not worked, and you keep sinking more cost into this sunk cost fallacy. And it's supposed to give you some kind of spiritual message, and to the point where you're ready to give up, and only then does he come through. You remember his story, with the guitar lesson, because he didn't think that the guitar teacher was teaching him in the way that he thought he should be taught. And so he says, okay, one lesson, I'm out of here. Screw that guitar teacher. That's not going to work for me. That's not working for me. How did you know that it wasn't going to work for you? How did you know that? If you could look at that situation, make an assessment of yourself, make an assessment of the teacher, not that you could have made an assessment of the teacher, made an assessment of the style, made an assessment of the future possibility of you learning the guitar. And if you can say, no, this isn't going to work for me after one lesson, and feel very righteous about that, then why are you asking everybody else to just keep doing this thing that doesn't make sense to them, that doesn't work in their life, that they have been trying again and again and again? They've gone broke doing this thing, and they're just supposed to do it until their body breaks down. Why do you expect them to continue doing that when you wouldn't follow your own example and just do what the expert says? Thank you.
You can take it. Some of the things that you thought in your life were rejection were not rejection. You just weren't ready.
Okay. So there, yeah. There it is. I want to return to an earlier question to just kind of close this off. So you have to work at a thing for years and years and decades and decades. You got to put in your 10,000 hours before you're any good at the thing you're trying to do. Before you receive a breakthrough, before the light bulb flashes in your head, you get that moment. How is that not indistinguishable from there being no God and you just doing all the work? You've done all the work. These people who are, even in this story, if you were loading, I don't know how many of these servants they were, so maybe this wasn't such a heavy lift. Maybe there were a lot of them and a lot of buckets. They could do it pretty quickly. But let's just go with the picture that he's trying to paint. If they're going through that much labor, that much manual labor, and it took that much time to get one drop of wine, why couldn't they have just gone into town and bought some wine? So how does this actually make things better? How is it different or demonstrably better in some way than just going and buy some more wine? I don't understand. I don't know what this is supposed to be proving. And if you're trying to do something, whatever it is, you're trying a business opportunity that keeps failing and failing and failing, and you're so stupid, and you've ignored the math that you're just going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it because you think that's where God is leading you. And finally, you do it and it works out for you. Good. Congratulations. But how do you know that you didn't just do that from your own effort? Because you cried out to God 10 years ago and he didn't come through. So you worked at it for 10 years and you came through, kind of like a person with no God. So I don't see how this is an advertisement for your God. I really don't. So, anyway, there's your sermon for today. Those are my thoughts. How about yours? You know what to do. skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Log in your Discuss account, discuss away. Send me an email, skepticsandseekers@gmail.com. Until next time, I will see you in the comments. In the meantime, I am most certainly